It was a quiet Tuesday night when Thomas found the ticket. Not in a drawer, not tucked away in her bag, no. It was on the kitchen counter, an unexpected piece of paper that had no business being there. The opera, it said, printed in elegant black letters on an otherwise ordinary ticket. The date was for tomorrow night. Erica had never mentioned anything about attending an opera. She never even liked opera. That was his thing, his escape from the world of art dealers and business meetings. It was something he did alone, a rare indulgence that he never asked her to share. She was content with her own hobbies, interior design, shopping, spending time with friends. But the opera? That wasn't her scene. At first, Thomas didn't think much of it. Maybe she had bought it for herself as a treat. After all, Erica had her own life. They were both independent people, right? But then the nagging feeling started to eat at him. Why hadn't she told him about the ticket? She told him everything. Or she used to. Maybe she hadn't thought it was important. Or maybe, just maybe, she didn't want him to know. He sat there for a moment, turning the ticket over in his hand. It wasn't like her to keep things from him, especially something so trivial. His gut twisted. He knew that feeling. It was the same gut feeling he'd ignored years ago when she first started pulling away. Those quiet, unexplained absences, the late-night phone calls. And now this. Suddenly, it was clear. Something had changed. He had never been the type to jump to conclusions. Thomas prided himself on being a man of reason, logical, calm, and always methodical. But there was something about this ticket and the way Erica was acting lately that didn't sit right. That was when the first seed of doubt was planted. Erica had been different for a while. He couldn't pinpoint when it started, but it was noticeable. At first, it was small changes, nothing that screamed betrayal, nothing that screamed anything. But over time, they added up. The excuses, the sudden work meetings, the weekend spent away without him. Thomas would have understood if it was a business trip, but no, these were the kind of solo ventures that didn't make sense. And it wasn't just that, she was getting colder. The warmth in her eyes when she looked at him had dimmed. She seemed distracted, even distant. But that's just it, right? The signs are always there, but you don't see them until you're looking for them. He didn't want to see them. Who would? He loved her. He trusted her. But now, he couldn't ignore it anymore. For 14 years, he had built his life around her. They had a beautiful routine. He was an art dealer, and she was more than just a pretty wife at his side. She had taste, flair, and an uncanny knack for making their home a place that felt like an extension of his galleries. They had always supported each other. But in recent months, Thomas felt something shift, something unspoken, something deeper. And then there was the ticket. He didn't wait. He knew that something was wrong. And tonight, he wasn't going to sit idly by like some passive observer. If she was going to play games, he was going to play too. And he wasn't going to be the one left in the dark. Thomas wasn't a man who lost control easily. But when his anger boiled, it was like a firestorm. He grabbed his coat, locked the door behind him, and drove straight to the opera house. He wasn't even sure why he went. He didn't know what he was hoping to find. But he knew this. If she was lying, if she was betraying him, then he was damn well going to find out. By now, you might be wondering about Thomas. Who was this man? The one whose emotions had been churned up by something as small as a ticket to an opera? The truth is, Thomas wasn't someone who was easily shaken. He was a man of action, one who had spent most of his life behind a desk in the art world, making deals and pushing boundaries in the realm of business. But even though he worked with high-end art, one thing Thomas didn't have was an eye for personal deception. He wasn't the paranoid type. He didn't second-guess people. He believed in honesty, in loyalty, in integrity. But that had all changed in recent months. Erica, the woman he had married, the woman he had trusted, had started to slip away. He couldn't quite explain it, but he knew that the person he thought he had married wasn't the same one who sat across from him at the dinner table now. When the signs became too obvious, it was hard not to question everything. She had become someone else, someone who wasn't his. But as much as he might have suspected, Thomas never took his frustrations out on her. He was always the calm one. He was patient, methodical. It was how he dealt with the constant pressure of running a gallery, navigating egos, handling delicate deals. In his work, there was no room for mistakes. But now it was different. This wasn't a deal. This wasn't art. This was his life. And his marriage? Well, that wasn't something he could take lightly. It wasn't a painting that could be rearranged when it no longer fit the frame. He didn't know yet what was really going on. He wasn't sure if it was betrayal. But he wasn't going to sit there and wait for the truth to come to him. Not this time. As Thomas turned the car onto the road toward the opera house, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of control. He wasn't waiting anymore. He wasn't just a passive observer. He was a man on a mission. And tonight, Erica's carefully crafted lies would be exposed. Thomas parked his car a few blocks from the opera house, the dim glow of the marquee above casting long shadows across the sidewalk. His mind raced, but his body was calm, too calm. The air was thick with the tension that had been building over the past few months. He didn't know what he expected to find tonight, but deep down he knew. He didn't need to search for proof. His gut had already told him everything. What he needed now was confirmation, and he was going to get it. He watched the front entrance, waiting for Erica's familiar silver sedan to pull up. Minutes passed, each one longer than the last, until finally a car slowed and stopped in front of the opera house. It wasn't Erica's. Instead, a dark BMW slid smoothly to the curb, the headlights cutting through the night air. A tall figure in a black coat stepped out, and for a moment, Thomas thought he saw the man's face, but he quickly looked away. He didn't need to see more. He already knew who it was. Marcus Drake was one of the up-and-coming stars in the New York art scene. Tall, with the kind of disheveled, artistic charm that drew women to him like moths to a flame. He wasn't someone Thomas considered a friend, but they had crossed paths enough times in gallery openings and fundraisers. The two men had always been cordial, but that was it. Marcus was the kind of artist who thrived on drama, on pushing boundaries, and from the very first time Thomas had met him, there had always been something about the man that rubbed him the wrong way. And now, here he was walking toward the opera house with Erica. Thomas's heart rate quickened, but his breathing remained steady. He wasn't going to let emotion take over. No, this was a game now, and Thomas was going to play it his way. As he watched Marcus open the door for Erica, his worst fears were confirmed. The two of them shared a laugh, close, intimate, and then entered the opera house together, disappearing through the doors. Thomas didn't follow immediately. He stood still for a moment, feeling his jaw tighten, his fists clenching by his sides. He knew everything he needed to know now. Erica had been seeing Marcus. That was what she had been hiding. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the sudden withdrawal from their shared life. And now, the truth had slapped him in the face. He had been so blind. All those moments he had ignored, all those excuses she had given him for her absences, all of it had been leading to this. Erica and Marcus had been seeing each other for a while now, and Thomas hadn't even noticed. But tonight, he wasn't just going to stand by. Thomas didn't drive straight home. No, he wasn't going to give Erica the satisfaction of knowing that he had been sitting around, waiting for her. Instead, he took a few hours to himself, wandering through the streets of New York like a man on a mission. His mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just physical, or had there been more to it? He knew he wouldn't get answers unless he confronted Erica. And when he did, she wasn't going to have the luxury of lying her way out. By the time he returned to their apartment, it was nearly 3 a.m. The city was silent, the hum of streetlights flickering in the distance. As he walked through the front door, the smell of fresh flowers lingered in the air, an odd contrast to the anger bubbling in his chest. There she was sitting in the living room, flipping through a magazine as though everything was fine. Erica looked up, her face softening when she saw him. "Thomas? You're home late. I thought you'd be working." "I was working," Thomas replied coldly, locking eyes with her. He wasn't going to let her see the storm brewing inside. He had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to fess up, but she wasn't going to do that. She never did. He didn't waste time. "Erica, we need to talk. Right now." Her face instantly fell. "What's wrong? What's going on?" "I think you know exactly what's wrong," he said, taking a step closer to her. His voice was steady, controlled, but every word felt like it carried the weight of years of unspoken frustrations. She didn't say anything for a moment, and Thomas knew it was because she was trying to think of some lie, some excuse that would get her out of this. But there was no getting out of this. Not anymore. You and Marcus, Thomas said, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. You've been seeing each other, haven't you? The words hung in the air. Erica's eyes went wide for a second, and then she stood up, shaking her head. What? What are you talking about? Thomas didn't wait for her to come up with another lie. He pulled the ticket out of his jacket pocket, the ticket to the opera, the one she had been hiding from him. I don't need to hear your excuses, Erica. I saw you. I saw the two of you together at the opera house tonight. You've been lying to me, haven't you? Her face flushed with panic, but she was quick to recover, as if she had done this dance 1,000 times. Thomas, it's not what you think. We weren't. Don't lie to me, Thomas shouted, his voice suddenly louder than he'd intended. The anger surged through him now, and it was impossible to contain. Don't stand there and tell me it's not what I think. I saw you. I saw you with him. You think I'm blind? You think I can't see what's been going on? Erica opened her mouth to speak, but Thomas wasn't interested in hearing it. He was done with her excuses. He was done pretending he didn't know what was happening. I've been a fool, Thomas muttered, his voice growing quieter, but the anger still there. I've been looking for reasons to explain away your behavior. And all this time, you've been lying to my face. You've been sleeping with him, haven't you? Erica's eyes welled up with tears, but there was no sympathy in Thomas's gaze. Not now. Not anymore. It's over, Erica. Don't even try to deny it anymore. She stepped toward him, her hands outstretched, as though trying to reach him. Thomas, please let me explain. We've been going through so much. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Explain? There's nothing left to explain. The moment you let him into our lives, everything changed. Thomas's voice was steady, but it carried the finality of a verdict. The truth is, Erica, I wasn't enough for you anymore, and I wasn't paying attention. I should have been, but you made sure I wasn't. Erica opened her mouth again, but this time, no words came out. She didn't know what to say. She had already lost. I don't want to hear it. You've already destroyed everything, Thomas said. And now we're done. He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, defeated. There was no need to think for long. Thomas had never been a man of dramatic gestures, but this required action. No half measures. This wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the years of lies, the erosion of trust, the feeling of being made a fool. When it came to getting back at her, Thomas didn't have to guess what would hurt Erica most. It wasn't money. It wasn't even her reputation. It was her life. The one she'd carefully built. The one she'd torn apart with her lies. Thomas was going to make sure she lost everything she thought she had. First, he would expose the affair. He knew enough about her social circles to make it public without causing chaos. He'd orchestrate the perfect scenario where the entire art world would see Erica for who she truly was. A liar, a cheat, and someone willing to sacrifice everything for a fling. Marcus wouldn't escape either. He had his own reputation to protect, and Thomas was going to make sure the artist's own credibility was tarnished. No one would want to work with him after the public scandal. Then, Thomas would isolate Erica. He would withdraw all financial support. They had joint accounts and business deals, but that didn't matter anymore. Erica was going to pay for what she had done. She would no longer have access to the life she'd come to expect. No more art shows, no more gallery openings, and no more friends who would act as if nothing had happened. Finally, he would leave. Thomas had already set the wheels in motion. He had made sure that the gallery would be sold. His investments moved to places where Erica couldn't touch them. She had broken their bond. Now, he was going to break her social network. And then Thomas would be free. Free of the lies. Free of the woman who had betrayed him. And ready to move on, stronger than ever. But first, Erica had to face the consequences. I should have known the moment she started coming home late from the event planning with Mike. At first, I brushed it off as nothing. She was busy, I understood that. But slowly, the little things started adding up. The text messages with him late at night, the way she started dressing differently, the way she would glance at her phone and immediately block the screen when I entered the room. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just paranoia, old habits of a man getting too suspicious. But something in my gut told me I wasn't imagining things. I knew my wife, and for the first time in over a decade, I could feel something in the air change between us. Then came that night. It was a Friday evening. I had been working on a few repairs around the house, and Jessica was getting ready to leave for the event planning with Mike, the neighbor. She had been acting off all week. A little too quick to get dressed, a little too enthusiastic about every little task, and when she told me to have a quiet night, it felt like she was pushing me away. I watched her as she grabbed her purse, flicked her hair back, and kissed me on the cheek. A little too quickly, I thought. She was in a rush, but not in the way someone who had a meeting would be. It was more the rush of someone sneaking off somewhere, someone with something to hide. She had no idea I was watching her through the blinds as she left. I waited a few minutes, let her get out of sight, then I slipped on my jacket. I wasn't about to just let her walk out of the house without a better understanding of what she was really up to. I had a gut feeling, and for once, I wasn't going to ignore it. I followed her. She drove straight to Mike's house, a couple of blocks away. I parked a few houses down, my heart pounding. I didn't know what I expected to see, but this wasn't it. She walked up to the door. Mike opened it with that familiar grin of his, like he'd been waiting for her. I could see the way he looked at her, the way they stood together at the door. He didn't just greet her like a colleague. It was more, too much more. I sat there in the dark, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. For a long time, I just watched. I had no idea what I was waiting for, but I was determined to see it through. A few hours passed, and still, they didn't come out. I watched as lights flickered through the windows. I couldn't hear their voices, but I didn't need to. It was the body language, the closeness, the lingering touches, the laughter that sounded too easy, too comfortable, that told me everything. Something in my chest snapped, and I knew. This wasn't about event planning. This wasn't about a casual work project. This was something more, much more. I didn't storm into their house. That would have been an emotional reaction, and right now I needed to be clear-headed. If I confronted them in a rage, I'd give them a way out. They'd deny it, or worse, spin it into something I couldn't control. I couldn't afford to be impulsive. So, I did what any man would do when faced with a truth he didn't want to see. I took out my phone and started taking pictures. The first few shots were shaky. My hands were trembling with a mix of disbelief and fury. But I steadied myself, snapped a few more, getting clear shots of their faces and the cozy, intimate setting in front of me. It was hard to keep my anger under control, but I did. I needed this. I needed proof. Cold, hard evidence. I didn't leave right away. I stayed there for what felt like hours, watching them, processing the truth of what was happening just a few yards away from me. I didn't know how long I sat in that car, but it didn't matter. I had everything I needed. I couldn't go in there and demand an explanation yet. Not until I had all the facts. So, I started the car and drove home, my mind reeling. I didn't speak a word when Jessica came through the door a little later that evening. She walked in with her usual smile, like everything was perfectly normal. I barely looked at her as she greeted me. "Hey babe, Mike and I wrapped things up and it's all set for tomorrow," she said, clearly exhausted. But her tone, flat and rehearsed, told me everything I needed to know. I decided to wait. No emotional confrontations, no accusations just yet. I'd watched enough true crime documentaries to know that acting too soon, making emotional decisions, could ruin everything. Instead, I decided to lay low, act as normal as possible, and watch her closely. For the next few days, I watched her behavior with a hawk's eye. The subtle signs were everywhere. The late nights with work calls from Mike, the whispered conversations when she thought I wasn't listening, the way she'd always move her phone out of sight when I walked into a room. At first, I thought maybe I was just overthinking things, but then there were the little inconsistencies in her stories. One evening, I asked her about Sarah, Mike's wife, who I hadn't seen in a while. "Oh, Sarah's just busy with her mom," Jessica had said, barely looking up from her phone. I didn't let it go. I thought she was supposed to help with the event planning. Jessica's eyes briefly shifted before she quickly returned to her phone. "Well, we're handling it. Mike and I." The way she said Mike and I didn't sit right with me. Too much emphasis, too little explanation. That was it for me. I knew she was lying. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. I needed more. Jessica didn't know it, but I'd been doing my homework. I had already set up a small GPS tracker on her car that week. It wasn't something I was proud of, but I had to be sure. There was no room for doubt. She told me she'd be at the event planning with Mike all day. I decided to follow her. I waited until she left, then slid into my car. I kept my distance, staying a few blocks behind, and followed her as she drove, weaving in and out of traffic. She didn't stop at the community center. Instead, she made a right turn and drove straight to Mike's house. I parked a few houses away, where I could see her knock on the door. Mike opened it instantly, and I could see them talking for a few moments before she stepped inside. My heart pounded as I watched them. Every minute felt like an eternity, but I stayed put, waiting for what I knew was coming. Hours passed, and I didn't move a muscle. By the time Jessica left, it was well after 8 p.m. I'd had enough. I followed her home again, making sure she didn't see me. When she walked through the door, she looked completely at ease. "Hey," she said, dropping her purse on the counter. "Mike and I got everything sorted out. It was a long day." I nodded, though my stomach churned. I didn't even have to ask what she'd been doing all day. I already knew, but I needed more. I wasn't going to let her wiggle out of this. She was already sinking, and it was time to reel her in. The next morning, when she was in the shower, I went through her bag. Sure enough, I found what I was looking for, a receipt from a hotel bar, dated a few days earlier. 2 cocktails, a small appetizer. I knew she had said she was working late that night. I had no idea how she thought I wouldn't notice the discrepancy. I wasn't done yet, though. I called Mike's wife, Sarah. "Hey, Sarah. Jessica mentioned you were helping with the event. Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. There was a long pause. "I've been in Florida visiting my mom," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "I'm not involved with the event at all." The ground shifted beneath my feet. I felt my blood boil. I thanked her and hung up, trying not to let my anger spill over. So Jessica had been lying about everything. I wasn't done. I needed one more thing, one final confirmation before I confronted her. A few days later, Jessica left for another planning session with Mike. I had enough. I wasn't waiting around any longer. I drove straight to Mike's house, walked up to the door, and knocked. Mike opened it, his face draining of color when he saw me standing there. "Hey, I thought I'd stop by and see how the planning's going," I said casually, stepping inside. Jessica appeared behind him, her face pale as she stared at me, trying to keep her cool. I didn't need to say a word. The wine glasses on the table, the cozy scene, they told me everything I needed to know. "Funny," I said, holding up one of the glasses. "I didn't realize event planning required wine." Jessica stumbled for an explanation, but I wasn't listening. I already knew everything. I left without another word. This wasn't about talking anymore. It was about action, and I was done. I left Mike's house feeling a mix of cold fury and a strange sense of relief. I had what I needed. Everything was laid out in front of me. The lies, the deceit, the affair that had been right under my nose for so long. There was no more room for denial. She couldn't explain this one away. Jessica had crossed the line, and now it was time for me to take action. When I got home, Jessica was already there, pacing in the living room. She looked up as I walked through the door, her eyes flicking to my face for a moment before quickly looking away. She wasn't stupid. She could tell something had shifted. "Hey," she said in that overly casual tone that now grated on my nerves. "I didn't expect you back so soon." I didn't respond right away. I took a moment to let the silence stretch out between us. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to feel the weight of what was coming. "I went to Mike's house," I said flatly, watching her reaction. Her face immediately went pale. I could see the panic in her eyes, the way she tried to mask it with a forced smile. "You went to Mike's? Why would you?" "Don't lie to me, Jessica." I cut her off, my voice sharp. "I know about the hotel, the drinks, the late nights, the planning sessions you keep having with him." I took a step forward, watching her recoil slightly. "You thought I wouldn't figure it out? You really thought I wouldn't catch on? You were careful, but you weren't careful enough." Jessica opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop her. "Save it. I've already seen enough to know exactly what's going on here." She stood there frozen, her mouth working like she was trying to find the right words, but she had nothing. Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape, but there was no getting out of this. There was no easy way out. "Mike," I said again, my voice low. "That's who you've been seeing behind my back? I thought we were good, Jessica." I thought we were better than that. Her face turned a deep shade of red, and for a second, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Please, she began, taking a step toward me, her voice shaking now. It's not what you think. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to find out like this. Oh, really? I spat. You never meant for me to find out? Funny, because everything you've been doing lately seems designed to make sure I don't find out. You've been playing this game, Jessica. You've been lying to my face for months now. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. But there was no hiding from the truth now. I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened. It was just a mistake. She looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. I love you. I do. I swear. But Mike and we just connected in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't planned. I looked at her, stunned by her audacity. A mistake? Really? You've been sneaking around with Mike for months, and you call it a mistake? You think I'm going to believe that? She stepped back, shaking her head, as if searching for the right words. I didn't mean to hurt you, Jack. I swear I didn't. I'm so sorry. I didn't answer. I just stood there, letting the silence settle between us. It wasn't about her words anymore. It was about her actions. The betrayal that she had been hiding from me for so long was too deep to cover up with empty apologies. For a few minutes, Jessica stayed quiet, standing there with her head bowed, waiting for me to say something, anything. But I had nothing to say. I was done talking. I knew this wasn't the time to give in to rage. Anger was an emotion I'd mastered over the years, and I wasn't about to let it rule my decisions now. I had already seen what I needed to see. Now it was time to figure out what to do next. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. It wasn't going to be about me yelling at her or even throwing her out of the house. No, this was about taking control. It was about making her understand that there were consequences for what she'd done. But I had to be smart about it. I had built a good life for myself, and for us. I wasn't going to let her destroy it for me. But I sure as hell wasn't going to let her get away with this either. There had to be a price. The first step was simple. Expose her. Expose the affair to everyone in her life. I thought about how I'd go about it, who I could call in to help me. I had contacts. I had people who owed me favors. This wouldn't be pretty, but Jessica needed to learn that actions had consequences. I'd make sure Mike's wife knew exactly what was going on. I'd make sure the people in our circle knew the truth. But I wasn't going to stop there. I'd already started taking steps behind her back. I knew she'd never expect it. After all, she'd been too busy playing her little game with Mike to notice anything happening around her. But I was setting things in motion. We had some joint assets, investments, a few shared properties. As soon as I'd gotten the confirmation I needed, I started locking down our finances. I transferred money to accounts she couldn't touch. I called in favors to move things into my name. I wasn't going to let her leave this situation with everything she wanted. If she thought she could have both Mike and everything we'd worked for, she was sorely mistaken. I also made arrangements to meet with my lawyer. It was time to start the divorce process, quietly, methodically. She wouldn't know what hit her. Jessica had always loved the lifestyle we had, the dinners, the trips, the comforts. But that was going to change. I would make sure that she didn't walk away from this with a life she thought she could keep. I was going to strip her of everything she'd taken for granted. She'd taken me for granted. And now she was going to pay. The next part of the plan wasn't about being quiet. It wasn't about hiding in the shadows while I made my move. No, this needed to be public. Jessica needed to understand that everyone around her would know exactly who she was. I didn't just want to divorce her. I wanted to destroy the perfect little world she'd built with her lies. So I started with her closest circle. I called her parents first, told them what had been going on, how their precious daughter had been betraying her husband with Mike, the man who was practically family. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. But I wasn't done yet. I told them everything, the hotel receipts, the private dinners, the lies. By the time I hung up the phone, I knew they'd have a lot of explaining to do. Then came her friends. I called up her best friend, Kelly. You know, the one who'd always told me how lucky I was to have Jessica. Well, now Kelly was going to hear the truth. I wasn't going to keep quiet. I wasn't going to let them protect her anymore. The calls kept coming. People in her circle, people she thought were on her side. No one was off limits. Jessica had been playing everyone, and now it was my turn to make sure everyone knew who she really was. I wasn't going to be petty. I wasn't going to humiliate her in front of everyone, but I wasn't going to let her get away with it either. She had to understand that her lies had consequences. As the days passed, I kept working behind the scenes. I met with the lawyer again, fine-tuning everything. We'd be going for full custody of the kids, and I was ready to fight for it. Jessica wouldn't be getting them without a fight. She'd already shown her true colors. I wasn't going to let her take them from me just because she thought she could have it all. There was a moment when I stood in the kitchen, staring at the countertop. I thought about the years we'd spent together. The good, the bad, the ugly. I had always tried to be a good husband. But Jessica, she had let me down in a way I couldn't come back from. It was time to let her go. I knew the day was coming. I had everything in place, and it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. I didn't know how she'd react, but I didn't care anymore. She had chosen her path, and now she would deal with it. Jessica came home that afternoon, her usual smile fading when she saw me sitting there waiting. I stood up slowly, walking toward her, looking her in the eye. "You're not going to get away with this, Jessica," I said quietly. "You're going to lose everything." Her face faltered, and I could see the panic in her eyes. But it was too late for her to play the victim now. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to take mine. The confrontation had been inevitable. I'd been planning this for weeks, watching her every move, tracking the clues she'd unwittingly left behind. But what I hadn't anticipated was how quickly things would escalate once Jessica realized the full scope of my knowledge. That night, as we stood face to face in the kitchen, I watched her crumble. Her defenses shattered. She had no more excuses, no more lies she could tell. All the cards had been laid out on the table. "I didn't want this," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to hurt you, Jack. But you don't understand, Mike and I, we just got caught up in something. It wasn't supposed to be like this." Her eyes were wide with panic now, desperate for a way out. But there was no way out. Not anymore. "You made your choice, Jessica," I said, my voice unwavering. "And now you're going to live with the consequences." I could see her searching my face for some sign of mercy, but I wasn't going to give it to her. The anger that had been building inside me for months had finally erupted, and it was like a flood I couldn't control. "This isn't just about you and me anymore. This is about everything you've destroyed. Our family, our trust, our future." She took a step toward me, her eyes glossy with tears. "I'm so sorry. Please, Jack, I'll do anything. Please don't do this. We can fix this. I can make it right." But I wasn't interested in fixing it. I had spent far too long trying to do just that, trying to patch up the cracks in our marriage, trying to save something that was already broken. What she didn't understand was that this wasn't about salvaging a relationship that had already been shattered. This was about me taking control of my own life again. "Do you think I'm going to forgive you just because you say you're sorry?" I asked, stepping closer to her now. I wanted her to feel the weight of my words. "No, you've crossed the line, Jessica. And I'm done. You wanted to throw everything we built away for him? Well, now it's my turn to take what's mine." She recoiled, as if I'd slapped her. She wasn't used to me being so cold, so direct. But the man standing in front of her wasn't the same one she had married. I had changed, and I wasn't going to let her destroy me without paying the price. "Please," she begged again, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. I was confused. You think I'm going to buy that?" I shot back. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a choice, a conscious decision to betray me, to betray everything we've built together. She was silent for a moment, her face crumpling in defeat. "I'm sorry, Jack. I truly am. But I can't change what I've done. I can't undo it." "You're damn right you can't." I stood there, glaring at her, letting the silence linger. I had been patient for too long. Now it was my turn to make sure she knew the full extent of what this would cost her. "You've already lost everything. Your reputation, your friends, the life you thought you could have with him." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean? What have you done?" A small smile tugged at the corner of my lips. "You really think I wouldn't do anything about this? You think I wouldn't let the people in your life know the truth?" I could see the color drain from her face. "You wouldn't," she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "Oh, I would, I said, my voice steady. I've already called your parents. Your friends. I've let them know exactly who you are. You're not getting away with this, Jessica. She staggered backward, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter for support. No. Please, Jack. Don't. I'll do anything. I'll leave him. I'll end it. Just please don't ruin me. Please don't do this. It was a pathetic sight. The woman who had once been so confident, so self-assured, now reduced to begging for mercy. But I had no mercy left to give. She had forfeited that when she chose Mike over me. And now, she would pay the price. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before speaking. You don't get to make demands anymore, Jessica. You had your chance, and you threw it away. I'm done. For a moment, she just stood there, her chest heaving as she struggled to hold herself together. Then, slowly, she began to walk toward the door. I'll pack my things and go, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll leave. You'll never hear from me again. I didn't stop her. I didn't try to make her stay. It was over. She had made her bed. Now, she would lie in it. As she walked out the door, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. It wasn't relief, exactly. More like the calm after a storm. Everything had changed, and for the first time in a long while, I was in control. As Jessica drove away, I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring out at the empty street. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the way we had built a life, the way I had trusted her, given her everything. But that was over now, and I had no intention of looking back. Life had a funny way of showing you who people really were when you least expected it. Jessica had thought she could have it all, me, the house, the lifestyle, and still sneak around with Mike on the side. But she had underestimated me, underestimated how far I was willing to go to reclaim my life. I had lost a lot during this process, my trust, my belief in her, and a part of my heart. But what I hadn't lost was my self-respect, and that was something she could never take away. The divorce was quick, as I had planned. There were no long, drawn-out battles. I had already locked down everything, our assets, custody of the kids, everything that mattered. Jessica fought it, but it didn't matter. The damage had been done. She tried to make amends, tried to salvage something from the wreckage, but it was too late. I had moved on long before she realized what she had lost. In the end, I learned a lot about myself, about who I really was and what I was willing to stand for. Sometimes, the most painful lessons are the ones that come from the people you least expect. But those lessons can change you, make you stronger, more resilient. And that's exactly what I was now, stronger, more determined, and ready for whatever life had in store for me next.